My name is Margaret Ellis. I am 78 years old, a retired schoolteacher who spent her life giving everything she had to her only daughter, Emily. I lived modestly in a small house on the edge of town, surrounded by the memories of my late husband, Robert. He was the love of my life, and the gold wedding ring he gave me on our wedding day was the only piece of him I had left. That ring carried 50 years of love, sacrifice, and shared struggles. It was on a rainy afternoon when Emily called me in tears. "Mom, we're drowning," she said, her voice trembling. She explained that her business was collapsing and the bank was threatening to take her house. I didn't think twice. I walked to the small jewelry box, opened it with shaky hands, and stared at the ring that had never left my finger since Robert's passing. Selling it felt like cutting out a piece of my heart. But love for my daughter won over my pain. I sold the ring that same day. The jeweler gave me a fraction of what it was worth, but I took the cash and drove straight to Emily's house. My heart was pounding as I handed her the money, expecting gratitude or at least relief. She looked at the envelope, opened it, and frowned. "That's it," she said, her voice cold, her eyes narrowing like I had just insulted her. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest felt hollow, my hands trembled. I had given away my most treasured possession, only to be met with disgust. I stood there, forcing a smile, swallowing the pain. "Yes," I whispered, nodding slowly. "That's all I could get." Emily turned away, muttering something under her breath about how this wouldn't even cover a fraction of what she needed. She didn't even say thank you. At that moment, something inside me cracked. I felt invisible, used, and deeply betrayed by the very person I had sacrificed everything for. But I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply nodded, stayed quiet, and walked out of her house into the cold rain. The drops mixed with the tears I refused to show her. What she didn't know was that while I left quietly, I had already begun thinking. I still had power, more than she realized. Emily thought my love made me weak, that I would keep giving until there was nothing left. She thought wrong. I was done being silent. I was done letting her take without giving back. That night, I sat in my living room, staring at the empty spot on my finger where the ring used to be. Memories of Robert filled my mind, his laughter, his promise to always protect me. For the first time in years, I spoke to his photo on the mantle. "Robert," I whispered, "they think I'm nothing without you, but they're about to see who I really am." The next morning, I called my lawyer. Every asset I had, my house, the stocks Robert left me, the small pieces of land no one knew I owned, would be reviewed. The will that Emily thought she had secured control over would be rewritten in silence. I wasn't going to fight her with words. I was going to fight her with actions. The plan started forming piece by piece, quietly, under the radar. No one knew what I was doing, not even my closest friends. They only saw a grieving old woman sitting on her porch, sipping tea, looking fragile. But inside, I was sharper than ever, waiting for the right moment to strike. I sold my wedding ring to help her, and she threw my sacrifice in my face. That day, I lost something priceless. But she was about to lose far more than she could imagine. When Emily called me 2 days later, demanding to know why I hadn't transferred more money, I only smiled. "You'll see soon enough," I told her softly. She laughed, mocking me. "You? What can you possibly do, Mom?" What she didn't know was that the wheels were already turning, and soon, everything she thought she owned, everything she thought she had control over, would slip right through her fingers. And that was only the beginning. Stay with me, because what happened next will leave you speechless. If you think you've seen betrayal, wait until you hear what Emily did next and how I turned it all around. Don't miss the next chapter. Like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss how this story unfolds. 2 days later, Emily arrived at my house unannounced, her heels clicking angrily on my porch. I opened the door to see her standing there with arms crossed, eyes burning with entitlement. She didn't even greet me. Instead, she pushed past me into my living room and dropped herself on my couch. "Mom, we need more money," she said flatly, like she was asking me to pass the salt. My heart sank, but I stayed calm. Emily, I said softly, I gave you everything I could. She scoffed, leaning back. You have more. Don't play games with me. You've been sitting on that house for decades. Sell it. Sell something. You don't need all this space. You live alone. The audacity of her words cut deeper than any knife. I looked around at my home. The walls that had heard my laughter with Robert, the floors where Emily took her first steps, the kitchen where I cooked her favorite meals when she was sick. She wanted me to give that up, too? You'd throw your own mother out just to fix your mess? I asked, my voice trembling. Emily shrugged like it was nothing. It's not about throwing you out, Mom. It's about priorities. You're old. You don't need much. I have a family to take care of. You're supposed to help me. Those words echoed in my head long after she left. You're supposed to help me. No, Emily. A child is supposed to honor her mother, not strip her bare. That night, I sat in the dark, my thoughts swirling. She had become someone I didn't recognize, cold, greedy, ungrateful. But this was my fault too. I had spoiled her with my sacrifices, never letting her face the weight of her own actions. The following morning, I met with my lawyer, Mr. Benson, a kind man who had handled my affairs for years. I told him everything, every asset, every plan, every betrayal. He listened quietly, nodding as I spoke. So, you want to take her out of the will entirely? He asked. Yes, I said firmly. And not just that. I want everything secured where she can't touch it. If she's going to treat me like this, she doesn't deserve a single dime. He smiled slightly, impressed by my resolve. We can do that. I'll draw up the papers. And we'll move your accounts to a private trust she can't access. She won't see this coming. As I signed the documents, my hands no longer trembled. For the first time since Robert died, I felt strong. The world still thought of me as a fragile old woman, but they were wrong. I wasn't fragile. I was unbreakable. Meanwhile, Emily kept calling, leaving voicemails filled with complaints, demands, and guilt trips. She even sent me a text saying, if you really loved me, you'd help me without hesitation. I stared at that text for a long time before deleting it. Love isn't blind sacrifice. Love has limits, and she had crossed them. Days passed, and I stayed silent. Emily grew more desperate, and with desperation came rage. She showed up again, this time screaming about how I was ruining her life. But while she raged, I stayed calm, sipping my tea, smiling slightly. Mom, you're going to regret this, she spat, her voice shaking. No, Emily, I said softly, meeting her eyes with a steadiness she didn't expect. You will. That night, as the rain fell against my windows, I knew I was about to set something in motion that would change both our lives forever. She thought she was untouchable, but she was about to learn that the quietest storms hit the hardest. And just when she thought she had me cornered, I pulled the first string of my plan, a move that would leave her shocked and scrambling. What did I do? Oh, you'll see. The morning after Emily's last outburst, I stood at my kitchen window watching the sun rise, a calm determination settling over me. The papers Mr. Benson had prepared were neatly folded in my purse. With one signature, everything I owned was transferred into an irrevocable trust in my name only. Emily would no longer have access to a single cent. She thought she was playing chess with a pawn. She was about to realize she was up against the queen. Later that day, I called an old friend, Margaret Kane, who worked at the local bank. She still owed me a favor from years ago when I helped her through a hard time. I asked her to help me close and move certain accounts quietly. She agreed, her voice hushed but firm. Whatever you need, I'll make it happen, she said. That was the first move. Meanwhile, Emily believed she was tightening her grip on me. She sent her husband, Brian, to my house that evening. He came under the guise of checking on me, but his true intention was clear: convince me to liquidate more assets. You know, Mrs. Ellis, he said smugly while sipping the coffee I had offered, it would be easier for everyone if you sold the house. Emily is under a lot of stress, and this would take the weight off her shoulders. I smiled, hiding my anger. Brian, I said softly, you should be careful about carrying other people's weight. Sometimes, it can drown you before you realize it. He looked confused, but I didn't elaborate. He left with no money and a hint of fear in his eyes. The next morning, I took another step. I visited the deed office and changed the title of my house to the trust. Now, legally, the property was untouchable. I even arranged with Mr. Benson to draft a clause stating that if anything happened to me under suspicious circumstances, Emily and Brian would be permanently disinherited and investigated. While I was quietly securing my future, Emily was spiraling. She called me crying one day, laughing the next, then threatening the day after. "You're so selfish," she hissed during one call. "After everything I've done for you." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "After everything you've done for me?" I said. "Tell me, Emily, what exactly have you done for me?" Silence. Then a slammed phone. Each step I took gave me strength. I cleaned out my closets, sold old items for cash, and even discovered safety deposit boxes Robert had opened years ago. Inside one box was a sealed envelope containing investments I had long forgotten. The amount shocked me. This wasn't just survival money, it was power. Days later, I watched from my porch as Emily drove by slowly, glaring at my house. She had no idea that what she thought was still hers was already gone. And I was only getting started. The breaking point came during Sunday dinner at her house. She had invited me, probably to manipulate me again, and I decided to go. She served me last, giving me a cold plate of leftovers while everyone else ate hot meals. I said nothing. I simply ate in silence, each bite fueling the fire inside me. After dinner, she smirked at me and said, "That's all you brought for us last time? Just that little bit? You really don't care, do you?" I looked her dead in the eyes and nodded. Yes, that's all I had to give. She laughed cruelly, thinking she had won. But inside, I smiled, because she didn't know that while she was mocking me, I had already taken everything back. The next day, she was in for a rude awakening. What happened the next morning would turn her world upside down and leave her begging for answers. Stay with me, because what I did next will make your jaw drop. Don't miss the next chapter. Like, comment, and subscribe so you can hear how the tables finally began to turn. The following morning, I put on my favorite blue coat and walked into the bank with my head high. The manager, a young man who didn't know my history, tried to speak to me like I was fragile, like I needed guidance. I smiled politely, then handed him the legal documents Mr. Benson prepared. His expression changed as he read them. Every single account, investment, and property was being moved under my control and locked from any third-party access. Emily's name, which I had naively added to one account years ago, was removed that very moment. As the papers were stamped and finalized, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid. I was protecting what Robert and I had built with our own hands. Meanwhile, Emily thought she had things figured out. That afternoon, she called, pretending to be sweet. "Hi, Mom," she said in a sugary voice. "I was thinking, maybe you could let me handle your finances? You know, take the stress off you." I laughed softly, a sound that must have confused her. "Oh, sweetheart," I said gently, "there's nothing left for you to handle." There was a pause. "What do you mean by that?" she asked sharply. "You'll find out soon enough," I replied, hanging up before she could speak again. That night, I cooked myself a hearty dinner and sat alone at my table, savoring each bite. I thought about all the times I had given up meals, vacations, and even dreams so Emily could have everything. I realized something painful. Love without respect is just a leash for someone to pull. 2 days later, Emily stormed into my house, waving a letter. Her face was red with rage. "What is this?" she screamed. "The bank says I'm not on the account anymore. You had no right." I stood up slowly, meeting her fury with calm. "I had every right," I said firmly. "Those accounts are mine. That house is mine. Everything I worked for is mine. And you will never take it from me again." "You're punishing me," she snapped, her voice cracking. "You're my mother. You're supposed to help me." I walked closer, my voice low and steady. "I am your mother, but I'm not your fool." The silence that followed was deafening. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I didn't chase her. I simply sat back down, sipping my tea. The next day, I took things even further. I met with Mr. Benson again, finalizing the transfer of my house's title into a trust that only I could control while I was alive. I also arranged for my estate to go to a children's charity Robert and I had supported for years. Emily would get nothing unless she changed her ways, and from what I'd seen, she was far from ready to change. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor, Brian. He showed up without Emily, looking nervous. "Mrs. Ellis," he said, avoiding my eyes, "maybe we got off on the wrong foot. We can work something out." I chuckled coldly. "Brian, there's nothing to work out. You and Emily made your choices. Now, you'll live with them." He left quickly, muttering curses under his breath. Watching him drive away, I knew the storm was only beginning. They would come back harder, angrier, and more desperate. But I was ready, because when you've already lost everything once, you learn how to fight like you've got nothing left to lose. The next time they came for me, they didn't bring words. They brought something far worse. And that was the moment I realized just how far they were willing to go. What did they do? Wait until you hear this. It was 3 nights later when I heard the sound. At first, I thought it was the wind brushing against the windows, but then I heard it again. Footsteps on my porch. My heart pounded, but I didn't panic. Instead, I grabbed the small flashlight I kept by my bed and crept toward the window. Peering through the blinds, I saw the unmistakable shadow of a man moving across my yard. I recognized the shape immediately. Brian. He was trying to open the side gate quietly, clearly not expecting me to be awake. My hands tightened around the flashlight, but I didn't open the door. Instead, I reached for my phone and hit the record button, then dialed the police. "There's someone trespassing on my property," I said calmly. Brian noticed the light flicker on in the house and bolted back to his car, tires screeching as he sped off into the night. The police arrived minutes later, but he was gone. I showed them the recording. They warned me to be careful. The next morning, Emily called, pretending to sound innocent. "Mom, did something happen last night? Brian said you were overreacting about something." I smiled to myself. "Overreacting?" I asked softly. "Emily, the police have the video. Next time he steps foot on my property, he'll be arrested." She fell silent. Then her voice hardened. "You're going to regret this." I hung up. The more they pushed, the stronger I became. After that incident, I installed security cameras around the house. I also had Mr. Benson draft a restraining order, just in case. While they plotted, I kept moving forward. I met with my lawyer again, strengthening the terms of my trust and adding an ironclad clause. If anything suspicious happened to me, every cent of my estate would bypass Emily and Brian entirely. But Emily wasn't done scheming. Days later, I received a call from the nursing home in town. "Mrs. Ellis," the voice said, "your daughter Emily came in asking questions about our services. She seemed to think you were moving in." My blood ran cold. She was trying to put me away to gain control of what she thought was left of my assets. That evening, she came to my house with fake sweetness. "Mom, you're getting older. Don't you think it's time you had some help? Maybe a nice home where they can take care of you?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Emily, if you ever try to force me into a home, it'll be the last mistake you make." Her smile faltered. She knew I meant it. In the days that followed, I quietly strengthened my alliances. I spoke to my neighbors, my church friends, and even the local sheriff. Everyone knew now, if anything happened to me, Emily and Brian would be the first suspects. Then, something unexpected happened. My lawyer called me in for an urgent meeting. He slid a folder across the desk. "Margaret," he said, "I found something while going through the old records. Robert left a secondary account in your name. It's been accruing interest for decades." I opened the folder and gasped. The amount was staggering. It wasn't just money, it was a fortune. Robert had hidden this as a safety net, and now it was mine to use however I wanted. That night, I sat by the fireplace, holding the document, feeling Robert's presence with me. "Thank you," I whispered. "You saved me again." Emily and Brian thought they were circling a helpless old woman. They had no idea I was holding cards they couldn't even imagine. The next time they came to my house, it wasn't to beg, it was to threaten. Emily's voice shook with anger as she shouted, "We'll take you to court, Mom. You can't cut me out like this." I stood tall. "Try me," I said. But what they didn't know was that by the time they tried anything, I would already have the upper hand. The plan I had put in motion was nearly complete, and the moment to strike back was approaching. You won't believe what happened next, when Emily thought she had finally trapped me, only to realize she had fallen into her own trap. The storm came on a Tuesday morning. I woke up to find a letter taped to my front door. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize, demanding that I present myself in court because Emily was petitioning for guardianship over me. Guardianship. She wanted the court to declare me unfit, so she could seize control of my assets. I laughed, but there were tears in my eyes. She had sunk so low. Instead of panicking, I called Mr. Benson. He chuckled when he heard the news. "Let her try. We'll be ready." Together, we gathered every document, every recording, every piece of evidence that proved not only my mental fitness, but also her repeated attempts to manipulate and threaten me. The day of the hearing came quickly. I walked into the courtroom wearing Robert's favorite color, emerald green, a symbol that I was still standing strong. Emily and Brian were already there, looking smug, whispering to their lawyer. When the judge asked Emily to speak, she put on her best act. "Your Honor, my mother is old, forgetful, and financially irresponsible. She needs protection, and I'm the only one who can provide it." I almost laughed out loud. When it was my turn, I stood with my head high and voice steady. "Your Honor, I may be 78, but I'm far from incapable. My daughter is the one who needs supervision. She has tried to manipulate me, trespass on my property, and even force me into a nursing home for her gain. Here is the proof." I handed over the recordings, the restraining order, the bank documents. The judge's expression shifted as he flipped through the evidence. Brian tried to interrupt, claiming everything was fabricated. The judge silenced him quickly. "Enough. The evidence speaks for itself." When the ruling came, it was like a thunderclap. The judge denied Emily's petition and warned her that any further attempts would result in legal action against her. She was humiliated, her face red as the courtroom whispered. But I wasn't done. After the hearing, I handed Emily a sealed envelope. She ripped it open, expecting money. Instead, she found a copy of the new will and trust documents. Her eyes widened as she read the clause stating that she was completely disinherited. "You can't do this to me," she screamed in the courthouse hallway. "I already have," I said calmly. "You treated me like I was nothing. Now you get nothing." For days, she didn't call. I thought maybe she had finally understood, but I was wrong. One night, I came home to find my back door ajar. My heart raced as I stepped inside. The house was silent, too silent. Then I noticed drawers pulled open and papers scattered on the floor. They had been there, looking for something they would never find. I called the police again, and this time they took fingerprints. Brian's were everywhere. The officer looked at me seriously. "Ma'am, this is escalating. You need to be careful." I nodded, but inside I was more than ready. They were playing with fire, and soon they were going to get burned. The very next day, I made my boldest move yet. I withdrew a large sum from Robert's hidden account and purchased a small building downtown. It was a dream Robert and I once had, to open a community center for underprivileged children. I renamed it the Ellis House and transferred ownership to the charity. Emily would see it in the papers soon enough, and she would know. The wealth she thought was hers was already gone, transformed into something she could never touch. When she drove by my house later, slowing down to glare, I just waved and smiled. The more she tried to hurt me, the stronger I became. But Emily wasn't finished. That evening, I received a call from an unknown number. A voice I knew too well whispered, "You'll regret this, Mom. You think you've won, but you haven't seen what's coming." I hung up without a word, my hand steady. She had declared war, and she didn't even realize she had already lost. The next twist in this battle would shock even me. Because while I thought I was the one pulling the strings, someone else was about to step in and change everything. 2 days after that threatening call, I woke to find a car parked across the street. It sat there for hours, engine running, windows tinted. My instincts told me who it belonged to. Emily and Brian were watching, waiting for me to slip. I didn't call the police this time. Instead, I let them watch. Let them think I was just sitting there sipping tea, too old to fight back. What they didn't know was that I had already installed additional security cameras, hidden ones, that recorded every movement around my house. I wanted evidence, not a confrontation. That afternoon, a knock came at my door. It wasn't Emily. It was a young man in a suit. He introduced himself as Daniel Hayes, an investigator sent by the children's charity to review the transfer of the Ellis house. "We have to ensure everything is in order," he explained politely. As I led him inside, he glanced at my security monitors. "You're being watched," he said quietly. "I know," I replied with a faint smile. He helped me set up an encrypted system to back up all footage automatically. "If anyone tries anything," he said, "you'll have proof no one can erase." His kindness reminded me there were still good people in the world, unlike my own daughter. Later that evening, Emily finally stormed up to my porch, shaking with rage. "So, this is what you're doing with the money? Giving it to strangers? To kids who aren't even yours?" I stayed calm. "Yes, Emily. Because those children will cherish what you threw away." Her voice cracked with fury. "You're ruining our lives." "No," I said softly. "You're ruining your own." She lunged toward me, but Brian held her back. They left screaming threats into the night. The very next morning, I went to the Ellis house to check on renovations. Seeing the workers painting walls, setting up classrooms, and bringing life into a building that had been empty for years filled my heart with pride. Robert would have been so proud. I felt safe there, until I noticed a black SUV circling the block. That evening, my lawyer called with urgent news. "Margaret, I received word through a contact. Emily and Brian are plotting something drastic. They've been talking about contesting everything and even hinted at getting rid of you." For a moment, the room spun. My own daughter wanted me gone that badly? I steadied myself. "Let them come," I said. "They'll find out I'm not as easy to erase as they think." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the shadows dance outside. Around 2 a.m., I saw movement near my garage. I grabbed my phone and silently hit record. 2 figures, Emily and Brian, were creeping around, trying to open the side door. Before I could dial the police, my motion sensor lights blazed to life. They froze like deer caught in headlights. I stepped out onto the porch, phone in hand, camera pointed at them. "Smile," I said coldly. "You're on camera." They bolted, scrambling back into their car, tires screeching as they sped away. The next morning, I took the footage straight to the police. The officer who had warned me before looked grim. "This is enough to press charges. Do you want to proceed?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. As the officers prepared their case, I felt a strange calm. The trap had been set, and they had walked right into it. But before the law could catch up with them, Emily made one last desperate move, a move so reckless it nearly cost me everything. What did she do? You won't believe it until you hear the next chapter. Stay with me, because Chapter 8 will reveal the shocking night that changed the game completely. Like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the moment where everything turns upside down. Ask ChatGPT. The night of the storm, the wind howled like an angry spirit. Branches scraped against my windows, and rain battered the roof, as if the heavens themselves were warning me of what was to come. Around midnight, the power flickered out. I lit a candle and sat in my armchair, wrapped in a blanket, waiting. I knew they would come. At exactly 1:13 a.m., I heard the sound of glass shattering in the back of the house. My heart pounded, but I didn't panic. I had prepared for this. Quietly, I pressed the emergency button on the small device Daniel had installed, a direct signal to the police and my security system. Then I heard them. Voices. Emily's voice, sharp with desperation. "Find her. She's probably hiding." Brian's gruff reply followed. grab the papers. Grab anything we can sell. I stood silently in the hallway, the candlelight flickering across my face. They were tearing through my kitchen, drawers opening, glass breaking. I took a slow breath, stepped out where they could see me, and said in the calmest voice I could muster, "Looking for something?" Emily spun around, her eyes wild. Why won't you just give it to us?" Brian rushed toward me, but before he could take another step, the sound of sirens pierced the storm. Red and blue lights flooded the windows. My security system had sent the footage directly to the police in real time. Within seconds, officers stormed into the house, weapons drawn. "Hands up! Step away from her," they shouted. Emily froze, her hands trembling as the officers restrained her. Brian cursed, struggling until they forced him to the ground. I stood still, holding the candle like a lighthouse in the chaos. The officers took them out in handcuffs while they screamed at me, blaming me for everything. "You'll regret this," Emily yelled as they dragged her into the rain. I stepped onto the porch, letting the storm wash over me. "No, Emily," I said, my voice steady. "You'll regret this." The police stayed with me until dawn, taking statements and securing the house. One officer, the same who had warned me before, patted my shoulder. "You're stronger than most people I know," he said. The next morning, news spread quickly. The town buzzed with whispers of the break-in, the arrest, and the shocking fact that a daughter would try to rob her own mother. My phone rang nonstop with friends offering support. But I didn't celebrate. My heart was heavy. Emily was still my child, and despite everything, I loved her. But love without boundaries isn't love, it's weakness. And I wasn't weak anymore. Days later, the court issued a restraining order against both Emily and Brian. They were forbidden from coming near me or my property. The evidence was overwhelming, and the case against them was strong. I spent my days focusing on the Ellis house. The center opened with bright colors, laughter, and hope. Children who had nothing now had a place to learn and grow. Standing there on opening day, I felt Robert beside me, smiling. But the peace didn't last long. One evening, as I locked up the center, I noticed a car parked at the far end of the street. I recognized it immediately. Emily's. She was out on bail. She didn't approach, but I could see her watching me, her face pale, eyes filled with something I couldn't read. Anger, maybe, or regret. She drove away before I could move closer. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something told me this wasn't over. Emily was quiet, too quiet. And I was right, because the next time she came back, she didn't come with Brian. She came alone, and with something that would shake me to my core. What did she bring? What could possibly be left for her to do? The air that night felt heavier than usual, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I was sitting in my living room, the fireplace glowing faintly, when I heard soft footsteps on the porch. Not the frantic stomping of someone breaking in, but slow, deliberate steps. My heart raced as I reached for my phone. Before I could dial, there was a knock, gentle, almost hesitant. I opened the door, and there she was. Emily. She stood alone, her hair disheveled, her clothes damp from the mist outside. She wasn't shouting this time. Her eyes were red, swollen, and filled with something I hadn't seen in years, tears. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, can we talk?" Every part of me wanted to slam the door, but something in her face made me step aside. She walked in slowly, like a lost child. She sat on the couch where Robert used to sit, clutching a folder to her chest. "What do you want, Emily?" I asked, my voice steady. She looked down at the folder, her hands trembling. "I found something I didn't want to believe. Brian, he's been using me. He forged my signature on documents, he took out loans in my name, and he planned to take everything from both of us." Her voice cracked. "He was never with me for love. It was always about the money." She opened the folder and slid papers toward me. Bank statements, contracts, proof of Brian's betrayal. My heart ached as I read. For the first time, I saw fear, not greed, in my daughter's eyes. "I was wrong, Mom," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I treated you horribly. I let him poison me against you. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm begging for it. I sat down slowly, my own eyes welling up. Emily, you hurt me in ways I never thought possible. You made me feel like I was nothing. She sobbed harder. I know. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to stop. I thought taking from you was the only way to survive. The silence that followed was thick with pain and years of unspoken words. Finally, I said, "You are my daughter, and no matter what, a part of me will always love you. But love doesn't erase what you did." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'll accept whatever you decide. I just needed you to know the truth." Before I could respond, headlights cut through the window. A car screeched to a halt outside. Emily's face went pale. "It's him," she whispered. Brian stormed out of the car, shouting her name. "Emily, what are you doing here?" He was furious, his voice echoing through the night. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police again. Emily stood, trembling but defiant. "I'm done, Brian. I'm done with you." He pounded on the door, trying to force it open, but this time I was ready. "The police are on their way," I shouted through the door. "Leave now or you'll go back to jail tonight." The sound of sirens approached quickly. Daniel had set up an alert that automatically notified law enforcement when my security detected aggressive movement. Brian cursed, kicked my porch railing, and sped away just as the police arrived. Emily collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. For the first time, I held her, not as the child who betrayed me, but as the daughter who was finally breaking free from the monster she married. The officers took her statement, and this time, she cooperated fully, handing over the evidence against Brian. They promised to issue a warrant for his arrest. That night, as Emily slept in my guest room for the first time in years, I sat by the window thinking about everything that had happened. Could I truly forgive her? Could she really change? One thing was certain, the final battle wasn't just with Brian. It was with the wounds between a mother and her daughter. And the last chapter of this story would decide whether those wounds healed or became scars forever. The morning after Emily's tearful confession was strangely quiet. The sun streamed through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the room where she slept. For a moment, she looked like the little girl I once knew, the one who used to run to me with scraped knees and bright eyes. But the years of betrayal and bitterness stood between us like a shadow. I brewed coffee and sat at the table, staring at the documents she had brought. Brian's schemes were all there in black and white. Loans he had taken under her name, transactions that tied him to shady dealings. Emily wasn't innocent, but she had been manipulated and used. My heart softened just a little. Around noon, there was another knock at the door. This time, it was the police. They had caught Brian trying to cross state lines. He was in custody, facing charges not just for the break-in but for fraud and forgery as well. The officer assured me he wouldn't be a problem again. Emily cried when she heard the news, not for him, but for the years she had wasted with a man who only saw her as a tool. "I should have listened to you, Mom," she whispered. "You were right all along." I touched her hand gently. "You lost yourself for a while, Emily, but now you have a chance to find who you are again." Over the next few weeks, she stayed with me. At first, it was awkward. She didn't know how to sit in silence without guilt hanging over her. But slowly, she began helping me with the Ellis house, volunteering with the children, fixing things around the house, even cooking dinner with me. Each small act chipped away at the wall between us. The day the Ellis house had its grand opening, Emily stood beside me. Reporters asked questions, cameras flashed, and I felt Robert's presence so strongly it brought tears to my eyes. This center wasn't just a building, it was a legacy of love and resilience. When the ceremony ended, Emily pulled me aside. She handed me a small box. Inside was a simple gold band. "It's not Dad's ring," she said, her voice trembling, "but I sold my car to buy it for you. I wanted to give back something for everything you gave me." I slipped the ring on my finger, tears streaming down my face. "It's beautiful," I said softly. "Thank you, Emily." That night, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, she asked the question that had been hanging in the air. "Do you forgive me, Mom?" I looked at her, my heart heavy but clear. Forgiveness isn't something I give all at once, Emily. It's something you'll earn every day. But tonight, we can start. For the first time in a long while, we hugged without anger or resentment between us. As for Brian, he was sentenced to several years in prison. The last letter he sent Emily went unanswered. She was done with him, done with the life he dragged her into. The Ellis house flourished, becoming a safe haven for children and families. My story spread through the town, and people called me strong, brave. But I wasn't a hero. I was just a mother who had been pushed too far, and decided to stand up. Emily still struggles with guilt, but she's learning. She works at the Ellis house full-time now, helping kids rebuild their lives as she rebuilds her own. Watching her heal is the greatest gift I could ask for. When I look back at everything, the betrayal, the threats, the pain, I realize it all taught me one thing. Love must be strong enough to say no. It must protect itself, even from those we love most. And to anyone listening to my story, remember this. You are never too old, too weak, or too broken to take back your power. This was my story. Thank you for walking through it with me to the very end. If this story touched your heart, showed you the strength of quiet power, and reminded you to never give up, like, comment, and subscribe. Your story matters too.